Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience and thank you for holding on. We are ready to go. Please enjoy this presentation.
Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and begin. And just to make sure, can everybody hear me? Or can y'all hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we can.
All right, cool. Cool. And there is a chat box if anybody wants to ask questions, which I obviously used it a lot just now. So, all right. So we're mindful of the time. We understand, but we did actually do a test run, which worked beautifully. You know how that works with technology, but and so we're going to be mindful of the time. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat box, and we'll try to get to all of the questions. Plus, we'll have some time at the end for questions. But my name is Deborah Rue, and very honored to be working with CareerSource of Palm Beach County to not only do this free webinar, courtesy of CareerSource Palm Beach, but we're also going to do an event in Palm Beach County on May 11th, and we'll talk about that a little later on in the program. But right now we want to talk about employers and how they're improving their bottom line by hiring people with disabilities. So, next slide. I don't want to spend a lot of time, talking about myself, but I, as was already mentioned before, I am the mother of 2 grown children. My daughter Sarah was born with trisomy 21, commonly referred to in the United States as Down syndrome, and she just had her 30th birthday a couple of days ago. I also have a son who is also very involved in disability inclusion field, and so it's a family effort. So I am the CEO of Rue Global Communications, and I work with corporations all over the world, United Nations and countries, helping them create policies and programs to really meaningfully include people with disabilities in their workforce, but also retain people with disabilities in their workforce too, because probably as a lot of us know on this call, only 20% of people with disabilities are born with a disability like my daughter. Most of us acquire our disabilities as we live our lives. Doesn't mean we're broken, doesn't mean we can't contribute to the workforce. It just means that, maybe we might need to be accommodated in a different way. So I work with corporations a lot on this. I'm very active on social media. I co-founded Access Chat, which is now the #2 tweet chat in the entire world. I founded Tech Access, which was a technology company, and the majority of my employees, over 80%, were individuals with disabilities, and a lot of different types of disabilities as well. So I have experience as an employer. I also worked in corporate America for 25 plus years, so I know the language that employers are speaking. I am an author of several books. My latest book, it's a year old now, is Uncovering Human Capital, and if you attend the event on May 11th, we're going to give you an electronic and accessible version of the book. But the book was written for employers, sort of to try to demystify including people with disabilities in the workforce. There seems to be a lot of fears associated with this topic, so that's why I wrote the book. Next slide, which I think is actually a picture of my book. Yes, so I wanted to write this book from the perspective of the employer, because what I saw was it seems to be we were having a lot of conversations, but the employers weren't in the conversations in a way that I felt was meaningful. And so I wrote the book. I featured 31 different corporations from all over the world. I worked on it as a global book as opposed to just a United States book, because I was born in Florida, but I live in Virginia now. And I just found that certain stakeholders didn't seem to be in the same conversation. I would go to a conversation where there were service providers, and then a different conversation where there were employers, and different conversations that included people with disabilities, but I just didn't see everybody coming together enough to talk about these issues. And I wanted to once again demystify what it means to include people with disabilities in your workforce, and to help employers understand the broadness of the word disabilities as well, because are we talking about it from the perspective of someone like my daughter, a 30-year-old woman born with trisomy 21 or Down syndrome, and so she is qualified to be in the workforce and has worked in the workforce for many years, but what she brings to the table is different from what somebody that might be blind or somebody that is in a wheelchair, or so as a lot of experts know in the field, disability is a very broad term. So next slide. So the world is changing, and you can go ahead and advance, hit enter, and it'll show. But there's a lot of reasons why the world is changing. Thank you. Medical advancements, technology, there are legislation and treaties happening all over the world. There's a lot of things that are holding people back, like digital divide. Sometimes globalization can actually hold us back too, depending on where we are in that conversation. And then of course there's the good corporate social responsibility. So just diving into those a little bit. I have a radio program called Human Potential at Work. Also, we have a Facebook page that talk about this. And I really try to talk mainly to brands about how people with disabilities can add a lot of value, and that we're part of the diversity efforts that should be made, and we know as societies that including a diverse workforce adds a lot of innovation to the bottom line. And I had a very interesting conversation with a guest the other day, and she was talking about the Barbie dolls, Mattel Barbie dolls, and they have actually taken some Barbies and they've included artificial intelligence in the Barbie dolls, and the Barbie dolls were programmed so that they could talk to typically a young girl or a young person that buys these Barbie dolls. And if you ask the Barbie about a career, and say that I, as a young woman, want to go and become a scientist, well, Barbie will redirect you and ask you if you wouldn't rather be in fashion. And so Mattel realized pretty quick, since the women told them, women can also contribute great things to STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And we can do a lot more than just be in fashion, but the people that designed the programming happen to be men who thought of women, being in fashion. And so that's just an example of how having diverse people in your workplace can add value and really help you be more successful at the programs you're working. So also technology, and we'll talk a little bit about this more, technology is really changing everything for people with disabilities. It's allowing us to contribute in ways that in the past we were not as successful being able to contribute. I have a picture up here of Rosemary Musacchio, who is my Chief Accessibility Officer, and I've worked with Rosemary for many years. Rosemary was born with cerebral palsy, and when Rosemary lies flat, she can only blink her eyes. Rosemary also has limited control of her upper and lower trunk, and she cannot speak. She can verbalize, but she cannot speak, so she uses communications device to communicate with the world, and she's a brilliant technologist, and she has been featured all over the world with her, her brilliance. And so to decide that a person with a disability can't add value is just missing the boat. So, I spent a lot of time giving examples about this. Also, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which is a United Nations treaty, and most countries have signed it, and there's only 5 countries that have not ratified it. Unfortunately, the United States is one of them. We do have our Americans with Disabilities Act, which is wonderful, and the Americans with Disabilities Act will be 27 years old in a couple of months. But The problem with the Americans with Disability Act is if you are outside the United States, it's not going to protect you. So that's why I believe the United States should ratify the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities so that no matter where an American is, they're protected, their rights are secured. So we'll talk a little bit more about digital divide and globalization as we move forward, but next slide. So there's a lot about employing people with disabilities. One is that people with disabilities do not have the talent and skills needed in business. We know absolutely that's not true. I did a lot of studies. I featured a lot of studies in my book that talk about this. The Department of Labor talks about this a lot. Ask Jan talks about it. There's a lot of really good studies that prove people with disabilities add as much value as anyone else to the workforce. And as a matter of fact, we're finding that 11% of this year's college graduates have disabilities. So it's very important not to decide a person can't add value because they have a disability. Next slide. Another myth is that people with disabilities leave their jobs more frequently than workers without disabilities. We know absolutely for sure that is not true. As a matter of fact, people with disabilities in all sectors are staying on their job longer, resulting in up to a 6% turnover rate improvement. Turnover is very expensive for employers. So when they understand the retention that sometimes is in, I know with my technology company, Tech Access, I had a retention of over 90%, which was unheard of in technology. Now, is it because I was a wonderful company and a great boss? Hopefully, but to be honest, some of it was because the people that worked for me, many of them with severe disabilities, they did not have the same career options as people without disabilities. So they stayed with me maybe longer because I appreciated what they brought to the workforce, but they did not have many options, which I think is a societal problem that we're all trying to solve. Next slide. Another one is that people with disabilities have a higher than average absentee rate. Your workman's comp will increase. People with disabilities will be late to work. Once again, we know none of these things are true. We have study after study after study by a lot of very reputable universities that prove that these studies are not true. As a matter of fact, people with disabilities have less overall absenteeism, and the compensation claims are no different. We don't see more lawsuits by people from employers when they're employing people with disabilities. When we see the lawsuits are when people with disabilities are being let go, when an accommodation would have helped them stay with the company, but it's not because the person with disabilities are more litigious. That's definitely not true. And so a lot of these myths that employers still are afraid of, we know we've been able to prove they're not true, which was one reason, once again, why I wrote the book. I wanted to write it from the perspective from an employer to employers, so the business-to-business conversations. Next slide. So there's a lot of very interesting global trends. I had already talked about this briefly, but 80% of people with disabilities acquire disability as they live their life. Corporations all over the world are really actively starting to engage in this conversation. They're looking at it from the employment strategies, the marketing strategies, and that if I'm going to employ people with disabilities or make sure that my website is accessible to my customers, I need to tell the community and the audiences that I'm doing this. So there's a marketing and brand strategy, which is a lot of things my company works on. And then, of course, making sure that your products and services are accessible to all of us. And one thing that we found is when, for example, Barclays Bank, which is a global bank, is located in the United Kingdom, but they have credit cards all over the world. And financial services all over the world too. But whenever they worked hard to make sure that their products and services were accessible to all of their customers, including their customers with disabilities and their customers, their senior customers, that these products and services became more accessible to all of their customers. And a lot of the younger customers started using a lot of services they were providing specifically for people with disabilities and the older customers, because they found that it met their needs better than before they were accessible. So all of these efforts that are being made all over the world add value to all of us, but also allow people with disabilities to be more meaningfully included as well. Next slide. So this is about employment, but it's also about retention. I've been doing this since 2001. And I often would have, I don't have it happen as much, but I would go and talk to a customer and they'd say, well, we don't have anybody with disability working for us. And some of these were really, really large multinational corporations. And so I would say, okay, in the first place, if that's true, you definitely have a problem, because why do you not have a diverse workforce? Number two, it's probably not true, because if we look at the definition of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the reality is that a lot of us are included in that. And also remember, disabilities are not just about physical disabilities that you can see. Many people have invisible disabilities that are also protected and covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So it's not just about hiring people with disabilities, it's also about retention. New candidates and your talent that have acquired disabilities or acquired disabilities as they're working for you, not necessarily being hurt on the job. I was speaking at for an event a year ago, and there was a man that had worked with this corporation for many years, and he had a motorcycle accident and he lost his leg. There was another guy that was trimming up his cherry tree. He fell, and he now is in a wheelchair. So these people, you know, yes, they've had some traumatic things happen in their life, but that doesn't mean that they still don't want to contribute and still participate in the workforce. So it is very important to remember this is about retention. And of course, retention is cost effective because it's very expensive for employers to replace an employee. We have more people than ever before with disabilities graduating from major universities and taking training. The loyalty and the dependability is so much higher than any other segment of the population. Some of it might still be because not all workforces, not all workplaces, I should say, are welcoming to individuals with disabilities, especially people with physical disabilities. I know a woman that was a very successful executive chief diversity officer for a very well-known brand, and she decided to leave, and she put her resume out. She had an amazing resume. She got a job interview in California. They flew her to California. She went there. She got just an impressive resume. She comes into her interview, and by the way, she is in a wheelchair, a motorized wheelchair. And the employer looked at her and said, oh, I'm so sorry, the job has been filled. So, yeah, very, very discouraging for her. So what happened was she went to their competitor, went to work for them, and just really put them on the map for diversity. She got them in magazines. She was an amazing resource. So it was a shame that this one company could not see the value that this woman brought to the table. All they could see was her wheelchair. So we've already talked a little bit about accessibility, how it reduces barriers, and the reason why I include accessibility in here is because if you're going to be employing people with disabilities and retaining people with disabilities, which the law in the United States says that you have to, then you also have to make sure your website is accessible, the career portion of your website's accessible. When you interview a person with a disability, that's accessible and you're accommodating me. When I start working for you, you're accommodating me. If I get hurt, you're accommodating me. A lot of different steps. And that's why I like working with organizations like Career Source of Palm Beach County, because it helps to have a trusted advisor that's on your side that's going to help you navigate all these different pieces. I remember speaking with a large group of corporations one time. There was about 500 corporations. And someone in the audience asked a question. It's like, okay, I get it. I want to employ people with disabilities. What's the first thing I should do? And somebody said, just hire people with disabilities. And I said, okay, good answer, but as a business, you really need to have a strategy. So you need to consider, okay, I absolutely want to be, I want to be an employer that employs people with disabilities because they add value, get it, understand the bottom line, but you have to have a plan of attack. Where are you going to start? Are you going to take certain jobs and make them accessible? There's just so many moving parts, and quite frankly, in the United States, a lot of ways to get in trouble, which also scares the employers to death. Which is why, once again, it's important to have a trusted partner with you that can sort of help you come up with a strategy of how to truly include and retain people with disabilities in the workforce. So I do some of that at a real high level, a strategic level for these corporations, but it's really important to have partners like CareerSource, Palm Beach County, and others that can help you be successful. Next slide. So the ROI for corporations, and if y'all don't know what ROI is the return on investment. And that word, return on investment, ROI, is really important for corporations. Very important when we're talking to corporations and to employers that we're speaking the language that they speak. And they speak return on investment. So when I'm talking to the corporations, I'm always putting in words like ROI and corporate social responsibility and all the different buzzwords, diversity, innovation, add value to your bottom line, because I'm talking to employers and we need to use language that they understand. So including PWD, or persons with disabilities, into your corporate strategy are going to allow organizations to do a lot of things. It's going to allow you to expand your market, include more customers. It's going to allow you to attract new customers with and without disabilities, because we've seen studies being done that, especially with the millennials, that say the millennials will spend more money to do business with a company that is doing the right thing socially. And part of your social impact should be including a diverse workforce that includes people with disabilities. Recruiting and retaining employees with limitations as well as the aging workforce. Attracting new talent and maintaining the investment, especially when it comes to your high performance workers. I know that, I worked in the banking industry for many years, and I like to think I was a high performer in my performance reviews that I was. And there were times when I needed my employer to accommodate me. Sometimes it was because I was having a baby, or I found out that my daughter had trisomy 21 or Down syndrome, so I needed to figure that out. And so my employer worked with me. The employers need to work with your high-performing knowledge workers, and if you have, workers that are not high-performing, you need to work with them and try to understand why it's not working and how you can help those employees be more productive, including the employees with disabilities, whether they have them, they acquire them, they're just telling you about them, and often employees with disabilities, if they're invisible disabilities, they will not disclose it because often they're discriminated against. I, as an individual, have had a lot of challenges with depression and ADHD personally. And it causes me anxiety. At the same time, it causes me to be really productive, but I have a hard time turning off and relaxing and settling down. So we're people. We all have abilities and disabilities. I also really remind them that there's a competitive advantage through inclusion, and you can blend it into your corporate social responsibility efforts. So these are kind of languages we need to have with corporations. People like I need to have it, and then we need to make sure that that we know service providers like CareerSource of Palm Beach County is out there ready to support these corporations. Before I leave this page, I want to say one more thing. I trained a lot of service providers in Singapore, and I asked them a question: who's the customer? Is your customer the individual with a disability or the employer? And they would say the individual with a disability, and of course that's the right answer, but the employer, they also are the customer. You have to make sure that the employer is successful. And I've had service providers bring me employees that I understood they were trying to meet their quota and make sure that they got a certain amount of people employed, but they weren't a good fit for my company. And I remember this one instance where this gentleman, he had had a lot of hostility problems in the workforce. And they didn't tell me that. And I understand why they didn't, but at the same time, I right out of the gate started having problems with this employee. And I said to the service provider, but why can't you also be on my side? Because if I'd known that, I might have been able to put him in a different situation where he could be more successful. Why can't you be on my side too? So remember, you need to be on the side of the employer as well. Next slide. So for employers, it really is all about seamless integration, integrating people with disabilities all through the workforce, acknowledging you already have people with disabilities working for you, making sure that you're really working hard to incorporate them in all aspects of the journey. You're learning from them. The bottom line is, I say, societies function better when everyone gets to contribute. I also, as a typical mother, got to find a way to put a picture of my daughter in here. So here's a picture of my daughter, Sarah Rue, who will also be speaking at the event on May 11th about please do not underestimate her. And so it's really about seamless integrating, making sure that you have partners that can work with you to help you be successful, that you're looking at it from the perspective of employment and retention and, your marketing and accessibility of your products and services in your workplace. And remember, when you include people with disabilities in your workforce, they can help you be more successful with your clients and your customers that have disabilities because they understand that marketplace. Next. And I should say community. Here is a slide of just some employers that are already hiring people with disabilities around the world. These are not all of them. These are just a few of them. TD Bank is doing an amazing job. They're a Canadian bank, but they're also in the United States. HP, Barclays Bank, I mentioned them. Canon has been working on this for a long time. Sogeti is a French engineering company that's doing amazing things. Vodafone, Walgreens, Disney, AT&T, Microsoft, Bank of America. I could do, luckily, I'm now to the point where I could do about 5 of these slides filled up with all of these logos. None of them are perfect. Amazon's doing amazing things. They're all a work in progress, but they are trying. And I believe that we should applaud their efforts. Also, if you are a person with a disability or you have a family member that has a disability, and you should make sure that you work with brands that support our community, and you should send letters to the CEO telling them why you're supporting their brand. You should tell them on social media too. Next slide. And I think, okay, so in summary, the business case for including people with disabilities and retaining them, it is clear. And it is shared in countries all over the world, and not just developed countries, developing countries. For example, in Egypt, they're doing an amazing job of employing people that are blind and deaf. Just amazing job. They have some of the most talented robotics experts that also happen to be deaf in Egypt. They're winning competitions all over the world. Technology is redefining these opportunities. Driverless cars will allow people with disabilities, better access to get to work. You have wearables, you have robotics, you have all the Internet of Things, all of these things that are happening that are going to make it easier to accommodate individuals with disabilities. Corporations are leading the charge and the change, and all of us need to be working together to make sure that we have the social impact and the full inclusion. Because as our societies continue to age, and there's 76 million Americans that are baby boomers, and by 2029, 20% of the population will be over the age of 65. So we don't want to put children to work. So think about the burden that puts on the rest of the population. So why not include people with disabilities who want to work in the workforce? Next slide, and I think that's for questions. So I talked really fast about this, but we really want to encourage you to attend the March 11th event, and I believe I'm going to turn it over to somebody from CareerSource on the Palm Beach County, and they can tell you a little bit more about attending it, but we're going to really delve into this a lot deeper. You also have other speakers. I'll let them talk more about it, but it really is important to understand that corporations are successfully employing people with disabilities and retaining them all over the world and all size organizations. And it's not just corporations, it's governments, it's agencies, it's nonprofits, everybody is starting to get on board. So.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Elsa. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Deborah, for your amazing knowledge. And we're really looking forward to hearing more about this amazing topic on May 11th. Now, May 11th, we are having our REACH event, Reinforcing Employment, Access, and Career Hiring. We have Deborah Ruhr as one of our keynotes, and also Haven Kerma. And we have a day full of different knowledge-based activities that we would love all of you to attend. Tell a friend, bring a friend, telephone a friend, a company, a business, a family member. But remember, space is running out. And as of also May 1st, we have the prices going up. So we actually want you there. So this is the time to register. So make sure you spread the word. We have an amazing day, 8 to 4:30, breakfast, lunch, CEUs. We have hands-on breakout sessions, surprise guest speakers, diversity, business affairs, and networking. So we hope you can join us. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Sandra, there's her email, or myself, eDegoyas at careersourcepbc.com. And we look forward to seeing you. Does anyone have any questions for Deborah?
Elsa, I would just also say that you're looking for sponsors. It's very important that corporations, sponsor events like this. It's a good way to not only learn about, the topic and, the partners that you could use, but you can also meet some really talented individuals that are ready to work.
Yes, thank you, Deborah.
And thank you, Ed. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the reminder. We do have some sponsorships that have stepped up to the plate, and we'll surprise you and tell you who they are that day. But we're always welcoming more and more sponsors. It's an amazing event to sponsor. So if you know a sponsor, again, phone a friend, because it's all about building those relationships. And you might know someone that knows someone, and he might know someone, or she might know someone. And remember, also, at the door, we are taking registrations, but at the door, the price would be it's going to be $75. So we need everyone to register before May 1st, before our prices go up. And please tell friends and sponsors for us. Any questions?
Well, Elsa and everyone, thank you so much for having me on, and I thank you to Ed for his kind comments about Sarah. But this is a very important topic, and we're looking forward to really expand upon it on May 11th. This is the event to come, so please help us get the word out. Looking for sponsors, invite people that are looking for jobs with disabilities. This is a place where all the stakeholders need to come and be present.